Hello, everyone, and welcome to Depth Insights, where we take a depth psychological look at what's going on in your world. And my name is Bonnie Bright. I'm your host, and I'm here today with Nina Ross, who is an artist, an art therapist, and a psychotherapist. And I'll share just a little bit more about her background as we get to know her. But first, I just wanted to welcome you, Nina. Thanks for being here with me.
Oh, thanks a lot. It's great to be here and with all the members. Very grateful.
Good. Well, I'm excited about what we're going to talk about today. You and I have been talking about doing this for a long time, and I know that you're working on some really exciting things. And so, first of all, let me just share that you can find out more about Nina at her website, and that is at www.ninarossphd.com. And on that note, I'll just share her bio with you so that you can have some background. Nina Ross, Ph.D, LPAT, and ATR. I don't even know what all of those initials stand for, Nina. Maybe we'll get into them.
Okay.
But Nina has a Ph.D. in the depth psychology of art from Jungian Institute. And she's an artist, art therapist, and psychotherapist, as I mentioned. And she works from a Jungian perspective, which, of course, is one reason that I'm really fascinated by the work that she's doing and why I'm so excited to bring her expertise to everybody here at Depth Psychology Alliance. So Nina has led numerous workshops and retreats and classes at universities, retreat centers, and conferences. And she is a gentle, experienced, and patient guide through the mysterious realms of art and psyche. I love that. So again, you can see some of her art on her website at www.ninarossphd.com, as well as a number of other items that might be of interest to you. So Nina, I wanted to maybe start us off by asking if you could talk a little bit about something that we have discussed in the past together. And this is your whole idea of how we need to be taking responsibility for our own creative lives.
Yeah.
What does that mean to you? I mean, I like to think that I'm creative somewhere. I have creative bones in my body. I'm pretty sure of that. And sometimes it manifests better than others. But why do we need to be responsible for our own creative lives? And what does that mean to you?
That's a great start in, Bonnie. Because we all love metaphor, I would say the response of responsibility is really important. So how are we responding, I guess would be a question, to the creativity that is our birthright, is God-given. And like the other things that I do, my particular interest in this topic is because I am finally in a place in my own personal creative life/practice, creative practice, where I am taking responsibility. So it's kind of each one teach one. So because I'm immersed and embodied in what I've been, or not even me, let's just say my daemons, have been whispering in my ear for probably 25, 30 years, I'm juiced. And I want to share the juice.
That's beautiful. And that's such a creative process in and of itself, right? I mean, there's something generative in the way that I'm imagining what you're talking about that is almost like welling up, as you from your source, whatever that is, your daimon. Yes. I love that you introduced that and brought that into the conversation. Of course, I think most of us in this space, at least, would probably agree that we can't take credit for our own creativity, right? It's coming from somewhere. That's very, very important.
Yeah, it's the generativity is huge. It's life enhancing to me in a way that nothing else has been. To be painting the way, that's my medium, painting, and to be painting the way I've really wanted to paint for a really long time. So I'm particularly interested in helping other people track where they are in their creative lives and how they can respond and how they can embody and engage with what they need to do to take the next step to help this whole thing catch fire.
Yeah. Oh, it's so important right now, too. And I particularly find that's the case because of just the sheer speed at which our world is moving today. I mean, I guess I can only speak for myself because perhaps some other people, and maybe you, have found better ways, more creative ways to slow down and just really be more with the soulful part of things. And I feel really grateful that I found depth psychology because at least I have some kind of guidelines. I know that it's out there or in there, maybe is the case. And I know that it's really important to be always aware and inviting that soul in because it's there. But if we don't take the time to slow down and allow it to really engage with it, I guess I should say, then of course we just miss out on so much of quality of life, I think. And so it's really important for us to have ways and have containers and have guides such as you to help us to remember that and also to be able to access it when we sort of get stuck sometimes and shut down a little bit.
Right. Of course, I agree. And just on a note, I'm thinking of the word slow in relation to soul. And what I find with painting is soul isn't always slow. It can be
wow, it can be frenzied. I imagine that you.
Yes. Especially the kind of painting that I'm doing, non-representational or non-objective.
I don't know what you mean by that. So maybe tell us a little bit about your process. And I'd love to know how you came to painting, because I'm not really a painter, and I've always had a fascination for it. And just a little bit about your process and how that shows up for you.
Okay, thanks for asking. So, when I mentioned daemons before, I think that, and of course, as an archetypal inspired therapist, the painting chose me, I think a long time ago. And what I mean by that is it's a dual relationship. I think I was chosen and I chose it, and I resonate with that particular form. I didn't start out as a painter. I started out studying photography, but I fell in love with painting somewhere along the line. And I've put my foot in and stepped in and have had to, like everybody else, go to school and get degrees and make a living. And so now I finally have the time to not as much time as I'd like, of course, but the time to have a more regular, grounded, serious practice. So I'm particularly interested, obviously, is because I've brought it up a couple of times, in what is the psyche needing and saying for people that are called to have a life as an artist. Not everybody does, and we know that the word creativity has to do with everything. And art making is one form. So I'm particularly interested in having dialogue and working with people that feel that calling, in particular, the calling to make art. And in terms of our culture, where we are right now, and just, I think our culture in America in general, artists haven't been supported in many, many ways that they've been supported in other times in history and in other cultures to really be seen as the carriers of imagination. And so I'm just really trying to carve out a place where people who are called and are either stuck or just want to be in community have a place to be supported together.
I like that a lot, because, my imagination is that when you're an artist, that a lot of times you probably get kind of taken over by the daimon in the moment, or the muse. And so I suppose that there's a real need to have sort of some grounding experience in your life, some touchstone that you can hold on to. And if it's a container of people, for example, who can come together and support each other in that way, I'm sure that's helpful, because as a community of artists, for example, and any creative people, as you say, it's not just art, but it's really, I think when you can come together with a community of like-minded people, then something magic really starts to happen there, because you understand each other. You're starting from a place where the field that you are in together is actually manifesting something. It's communicating something, and something arises out of that field, that shared field that is created by the people within the field. So,
yes.
Yeah, I'm sure you've experienced that. Have you had opportunities? I know you run retreats, and we'll talk about one that you're going to do soon, but have you had that experience in gatherings with other artists and in your work, even as a therapist?
Well, yes. In fact, right now what's happening, Bonnie, is, you're right, the structure is in place for me to go and paint in my teacher's studio one day a week from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. and just show up, even if I don't want to, even if I'm tired, or when I'm tired, even when I'm not in the mood, and just keep going, So I think it was Woody Allen or somebody that said showing up is half the battle. I really, really think that's true. And I know we'll talk some more, but part of these retreats are going to be based on a couple of books, one of them being Art and Fear, which is a fantastic book. And I'll be giving people a lot of journal exercises and questions so that they can follow through with themselves and with each other as we create this community in depth But, one of the points being that there's the old myth of the isolated, miserable, perhaps drunk or chain-smoking artist, and everybody knows that's completely outdated. And what artists really need is to hang out with other artists so that the osmosis that you were talking about rubs off and, share work and talk about issues or just share the excitement. So it is really necessary to come together. So it doesn't have to be, of course, in the form of painting with another teacher. That just so happens to be what I'm doing these days, which I'm finding very fruitful. But the point being that people need each other to not feel like they're creating in a void. Because one of the things that stops people in the creative process is, why bother? Why should I make this piece of art? Maybe it's been done before. Who's going to see it, and who really cares? So we don't want people to fall into that abyss. We want to, I'm really interested in keeping the energy alive. Again, if it's of necessity, if it's a calling.
Yeah, and I mean, there's so many things that you're saying that I don't quite know where to go first, but I just wanted to touch on a couple of them, and that is, in the process of taking responsibility for one's own creative life, obviously it makes sense to reach out even when you feel like you might be very lonely. Sometimes that's the hardest time to reach out for some people, particularly people who are introverted. It's probably when they need it the most, is to be able to reach out. And so I think there's something about having kind of a really sit down, authentic moment with yourself and saying, what is it that I need here? And how can I actually extend myself and allow myself to be supported in new and different ways? So that's one thing that I could see, even if you're not talking about painting or making art, if you're writing, for example, as a creative.
Oh, definitely.
Or writing poetry or anything that you might do that's creative. So that's one. And then the other thing that you said that really struck me is this whole idea around showing up every day, whether you feel like it or not, whether you're in the mood to do it or not. So there's a certain amount of discipline, I think, that is required around it. And I believe, it's, to your point, it's that taking responsibility and actually using the word discipline, I think, is what's coming to me. And the connection I'm trying to make, and there is a point, really, and that is this book that you mentioned about art and fear, that really struck me and intrigued me. So I'd love to know a little bit more about how you perceive that those two things, I mean, why are those two in a title in a book together? What does art have to do with fear, and how does that relate to what you're talking about?
It has to do with everything. That's a great question.
Good.
Yeah. There is so much ambivalence that I've found. I'm remembering, Bonnie, in the mid-'80s, I was teaching in Minnesota, and I was teaching a class on creativity. And the first day of the seminar, I asked people to introduce themselves and talk about their creative process or their art process. And I think about 80% of the people said, in response to my question, said, oh, I don't know if I am an artist. Oh, I kind of think I am, and I sort of want to be one. I'm not really sure. So there's such a reluctance to embody I'm an artist, which is one of the points of this course, is to help people step in and say, yes, I'm an artist. This is what I do. And that doesn't mean, oh, I'm better than other people or I'm whatever. It just means, yes, I'm an artist. I make art. That's what I do. That's my calling. That's what I love. That's my passion. So that memory just came to mind. And then art and fear to go together for many reasons. So I'll just name a few, and I'll keep it kind of, because this is a big topic.
Yeah, it is. Obviously.
Yeah. It's the sense of moving into a place of crossing a threshold, in a way, from the kind of quote-unquote everyday normal waking life into a sort of mythic dimension, where that mythic dimension means I'm going to let go. I may even let go of my identity. I may let go of what I know, and I'm going to let the gods, so to speak, come through me. So this issue of how much am I in control? How much can I let go of control? How much can I surrender what I know and make myself a vessel for what wants to come through me? So I find that there's always, and my teacher has said that even people who are well known, have been painting for a long time or writing for a long time, go through this all the time, which is, can I get out of my own way? Can I let go of what I think this needs to look like and surrender to what it needs to be? So that's also what fascinates me in terms of having a relationship with one's piece of work. Going off tangent a little bit, it's that we have to make room to be in relationship with something else other than ourselves. And that's the archetypal or mythic dimension. So,
yes, I see. I mean, what's occurring to me is actually probably the more well-known an artist is, maybe it's even harder to get out of the way of that because they have a history or a track record, or they have showed up in a certain way to people who recognize and know their work. So I'm sure with each new piece, as you prepare and try to empty yourself and, move that ego gently, ever so gently aside, perhaps, so that you can allow whatever that is that's coming through. It must be very difficult and probably never gets much easier. Do you find that there are certain times or practices that allow you to do that better than others, or is it just sheerly kind of grace on one level?
I think it's grace and hard work.
Yeah, discipline. That's exactly what we were talking about.
Discipline, self-effort. The other day in the studio, for example, after about 3 hours, my teacher came over to see what I was doing. And I said, I just feel like I've been moving paint around for a few hours, and I don't know what I'm doing. She asked me, how are you feeling about what you're doing? And I said, well, I'm feeling good in some moments and really lost a lot of the times. And he just laughed because he said, that is, that happens all the time. But if you don't make the effort to move the paint around or write a bunch of things and then cross them out, or, write things and throw it in the garbage, then you don't get to the grace or the joy. So there's no way to jump steps. So it's really, being an artist is really hard work. And that's another thing that just to get real with each other about, because, in the culture, there's also been a sort of, I think, fantasy about art making, and creativity in terms of just the sort of bright side in a way, and not the shadow of this is hard work and I'm dragging myself to the studio and some days I hate what I'm doing, and how do we keep going anyway?
Yes. Yeah, these are really good points. And I'm just finding, because I identify with not being an artist more than I identify with being an artist, just because I don't spend my time doing things like painting so much. So I just want to qualify that, because I'm clearly aware of the difference. I'm not saying I'm not creative. I'm an artist in other ways, I guess. But it occurs to me that in this process of, like everything else, you have to work at it. You have to be disciplined. You hope that the grace is going to come through. Probably some people have more of a natural gift than others, but they're still struggling on the same level with having to get out of the way and allow what wants to come through, to channel this. I love that you said from the gods. I think that is just beautiful, because it really embodies that sort of mythopoetic space from which that inspiration comes. I'm thinking of this word inspiration and how it's related to inspire, which is breathing and just creating the spaciousness in which things can manifest. But I have to imagine that it might be helpful to really open up to something more whimsical, even like play, and to really end up engaging through a more of a playful sense in order to allow this to happen.
Yeah, play is so important, Bonnie, because with play, there's not a sense of, I really care what this looks like, and I'm very invested in this thing, and it's going to be in the next gallery. Play is a completely loose and open place of joy and fun and lightness and experimentation and surprise, and children know this so well, as we know, and that's why Picasso said it takes so long to become young.
That's great.
So again, it's that sense of just, I pray that I never get too sophisticated or mature in my work, that I can always have this playful quality. For example, I was painting with a client of mine in my studio yesterday in an art therapy session. And I told her to use her non-dominant hand, and she began to really open her body up a bit. And she said, wow, if something happens and I don't like it, or it quote unquote wrong or different than I thought it would be, then just something else is going to happen. So that's the thing about play. It's letting go and not having an agenda.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And I find in the kind of painting that I'm doing, maybe it's different with realism. I really don't know. I can only speak from my own felt experience, of course. But it's the mistakes, quote unquote, are not mistakes.
Right.
So everything matters. I used to make collages, and I think a couple of my most successful pieces were done with paper that I would find on the floor.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, found objects. So which just happened to be there, right?
Just happened to be there, just changing the focus and letting the whole world open up as opposed to my narrow vision of what I think it should be.
Yeah. And that's really, then you're entering the realm of synchronicity too, right?
Yes.
It's not cause and effect. That paper is there and you're using it, and whatever is meant to come out is going to manifest itself.
Right. And I'm a participant in this play. So I don't know, what is going to come out. That's why I keep saying the word relationship in terms of the piece that I'm working on and what it's saying and what I'm saying, and dialoguing back and forth and dancing. So it's really so much fun.
Yeah, I love this. I'm just thinking, we've all watched kids at play, and they're just so caught up in what they're doing. They don't have the attachment, just as you're suggesting. And whatever happens, they are fully and wholly engaged, and their bodies are engaged. They're not thinking this through. And of course, it also brings to mind, Jung talked so much about play and the value of play, and the little man figure that he had in the attic, and so many places, particularly in Memories, Dreams, Reflections, where he's talking about playing with the figures. And he did that his whole life, and I think he probably ended up playing more as he got older. Is this whole idea of it takes us so long to get young. I love that. I've not heard that quote before, actually.
Yeah, I know. I was also thinking about Jung a few minutes ago in terms of his creation of the stone tower and playing with rocks and playing in sand, and just really understanding what his felt sense was with the objects of the earth, and our bodily felt sense, our instincts, as opposed to our minds, were so sophisticated mentally and intellectually. And for people who I've read that I respect a lot, Jung being one of them, the last paragraph of his autobiography, he said, I just don't know. I don't know. I just know that the trees fill me and the clouds fill me and the rocks fill me. I'm paraphrasing, of course. So I heard a little haiku that reminds me of this. More and more, I know less and less. So, I'm very interested in the instinctual bodily felt sense, because pain in particular is very physical. And how can that place inform our lives? And that place, now I'll talk about the therapist for a minute, or psychology. I think it's really important I know in my practice of working with people and doing therapy, is being embodied myself and picking up from other people and helping them become energetically aware of what's happening in their body, because the body is also a guide, and it's for people to know that place. And really, it's a matter of dropping in. It's an unexplored terrain, not for dancers or surgeons or people like that, but for the sense of psychology in a way. And of course, Marion Woodman has influenced me so much in this way, in terms of remembering the body.
Being embodied,
being embodied.
Yeah. What you're making me think of is when things go wrong in our lives, and we all have those days. Sometimes we have those weeks or months, frankly. But when things just get chaotic sometimes and seem to just sort of be spinning out of control, I notice at least more now than I used to, which I think is progress, that I have this tendency, and I suppose we all do, to just sort of vacate ourselves first, right? So when things are crazy, we kind of like vacate our bodies and we go out there with the crazy, and then we're all just kind of running around and I'm speaking metaphorically, of course, and I'm sure you're very aware of this because you are a therapist and you sit with people, and if you are not present in that dyad, then there's no way that they can also be present, and of course there's no way that a third thing can arise from that. Yes,
very, very well said, Bonnie. And the way a teacher of mine says it is, can you be here? When you talk about vacating, when I sit still sometimes and stay for a while, I realize how profound it is to be here, to just be here, you know?
Yeah.
That even slows my whole being down, just saying those words, be and here. So, back to art and fear for a minute. So you're sitting in front of a blank piece of paper, beginning to write, or you're sitting in front of a blank canvas, with all the paints open. Be here. Be with that blank. And then trust the body, because the body will know one color after another, one mark after another, one movement after another. And that's all we need to do is just follow the next thing.
Yeah, because out of that stillness, I mean, we look at stillness and we might think that's nothing. But it's as I've heard Robert Ramanujan and others call it, is that present absence, right? There's something there in that, and if we can just slow down enough to move into that stillness, and we're kind of coming full circle here because that's where we started. But moving into that stillness allows the body to become a conduit, and then something to arise out of that and to be translated into a new form, which is on the canvas, as you mentioned, or on the page, or whatever it is.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes, being still or being here or present or open. Absolutely essential.
And I think that helps us move the ego aside as well, because really, as somebody was saying to me the other day, our egos are, if you think about it, are essentially a collection of our stories that we have told ourselves and that we've lived for all of our lives. When we came in as babies and all these big people were telling us what to do, and you do this and you don't do that, we have all this cultural conditioning, family conditioning, that we are building this amazing web of stories, and that becomes our ego. So the only way that we can sort of allow that ego to relax and those stories to move aside so that we can get at what's underneath there is by moving into that stillness more wholly.
Yes.
So,
and then in practice, let's say I'm painting for 6 hours. In practice, that's going to be a continual dance between the I and the not I. Between what I think might work with painting and what the painting actually rejects and wants something else. That's why I have to turn it upside down or take breaks or throw a bunch of water on it or just use a color that I would normally not even think about at all. And I thought of a wonderful quote when you were talking, Bonnie, about this sense of vacating and yet being present and all of these different beautiful ideas. There's a quote from, I think, it's either Philip Guston or Willem de Kooning. It says, when you're going into the studio, usually your parents come with you, a lot of people, your parents, the critics, your husband or wife, and little by little, if you're lucky, they start leaving. And then little by little, again, when you keep working, if you're really lucky, you start leaving.
Oh, wow. That's great. I love that.
And yeah, so I know I've had this experience of drumming, where I'm playing the drums, and then it's just energy that's moving my hands without the sense of I. And I know when I was working in my Ph.D. dissertation for Jungian, which is very much around these kind of issues that we're talking about today, and I talked to and interviewed a lot of artists about their work, and I did a lot of reading, of course, and Matisse talked about how important it was for him to just really get out of the way and not be so present. Because the whole wide world, and we can say the whole wide psyche and psychic history and ancestry and mythology, they're so much bigger than what I know personally. And yet the blessing is that we have a way to tap in, and it can come through us and speak to us. It's really exciting to me.
Yeah, it is exciting. It's absolutely what I love about depth psychology altogether. It's just this understanding that we have of the collective unconscious and that bigger, whatever it is that you want to call it, whatever term you want to use.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. I just love the knowing of that. And it definitely guides my life. And I think it guides everybody's. And it is at the core of what it means to be an artist. And it's funny because I'm just realizing we were talking about vacating ourselves in a way of not being present. And then you're talking about this whole idea of if you're lucky, then you will leave. You will go out of the room little by little. But they're two very different things. So there's so much in this whole idea that we're talking about being accountable for your own creativity, taking responsibility for your own creative life. It is so much just about awareness. And
it is.
And who am I? Where is that big S self that Jung talks about? And where is my ego in this? And just who are the characters and the players in this amazing dynamic dance, as you mentioned, that we're undergoing all the time, whether we're standing in front of a canvas or speaking with a friend or remembering our dreams in the morning or surfing the net or whatever it is, because it translates everywhere.
Yeah, and it's actually, as we know, it's all completely connected.
Yes.
There's really no separation and no boundaries, as opposed to the way we've been trained to think about those kinds of things in Western civilization. So I can be standing in front of a canvas and remembering a dream, and that informs how I'm making a mark, or having a memory. So it's all the one big soup.
It sure is. Yeah, it's all one big soup. Yeah, and we're the alphabet. We're the letters spelling out the new, whatever's new for today, right? Whatever's
Yeah.
Yeah. So, Nina, can you tell us a little bit about the retreat that you're planning in case anybody's interested? Because I know that this is, again, just such a powerful way that we've talked about taking responsibility for the creative life. So share just a little bit about what you have in mind for that.
Yeah, sure. It can be a couple of different formats. For people who really want to have personal retreat time, I live in Santa Fe, New Mexico. It's a beautiful place for people to come and visit. I have a studio here where I work with people. Weekend retreats, perhaps, 4 or 5 day retreats where people could come in and we would have a lot of time to really pin down the issues of what's happening with my creativity. What do I want to be happening? Where am I stuck? What do I need in terms of moving on? And a lot of that will involve one-on-one time with me, of course, as well as a lot of working studio time. So it would be both very experiential and then very reflective, including journaling and writing. And as I said before, using 2 books, Art and Fear, and another book that's called The War of Art, which is a lot about resistance.
Wow. This sounds so powerful and so needed. Are you imagining that the people that would be showing up would be artists already, or do you think that people who have no really art experience would also be able to tap into that?
Probably both. And the people that don't have art experience, if the desire is there and if the calling is there, demons or whispering or even screaming, then yes, open to everybody. And the other format besides the personal retreats would be online format, possibly through a Depth Psychology Alliance, of a group of people coming together for a period of time where I would give assignments and people would do art on their own time, and then we would check in weekly together. So that could be weekend format, a 6 or 8 week course, something like that.
Yeah, that sounds great. Again, coming back to this idea of being able to be sort of in a container where people can support each other and have a guiding force at the same time. Yeah, I love that. That's great. Good. Well, hopefully people will check in with themselves and see if either of these things sounds like something that they'd be interested in. We'll be posting more details if we can do something on the group level through Depth Psychology Alliance. So always, for everyone, keep an eye out on the events section on Depth Psychology Alliance. We'll be announcing any info there. And then also be sure, again, to check Nina's website, which is NinaRossPhD.com. So NinaRossPhD.com. And Nina, this has been such a juicy topic, and there's so much more that I'm sure we can say, but maybe we'll have to save it for our retreat, because I'm really tempted by what you talked about.
Oh, well, that's wonderful, Bonnie. The doors are open, and I want to let people know that I am very accessible. Please, when you hear this conversation, inspiration starts happening, please reach out. Email me, feel free to ask questions, start dialogue. I'm really open to that.
It sounds really delicious. Yes, start taking responsibility for your creative life and reach out.
That's right. There you go.
There you go. Great. Well, thank you so much for your time, Nina. It's just been really such a pleasure to talk to you, and I look forward to more.
Me too, Bonnie. Take care.